Hey sports fans, and welcome to the Cavalier Sports Report. I'm your host, Shawn Simpson. Joining me today is a very special guest from Fox Sports Kansas City and the Boulevard Royals live show. We have got Mr. Joel Goldberg. Joel, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure. Good to be here, Shawn.
Well, I am so excited to have you here. It is a historical time for Royals baseball, and I know that it is on every night on Fox Sports Kansas City at our house. And you're a legend in our house.
Oh.
So I am absolutely famous for having you here today with my two sons.
Well, anything to help out your standing in the family with the house,
Yeah.
that's a good thing too.
Yep.
Legend's kind of a strong word.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, I will say that a lot of people are watching now, much more so than say my first 5 or 6 years here.
Well, you take what you can get when you can get it, right? And it should prove exactly how nervous I am because I actually have 3 sons.
Well, the other one maybe doesn't look at me as a legend.
He's only 2.
So there you go. He won't know. Just don't watch this back with him in 5 years when he'll understand it.
Yeah, and if I do, I'll just apologize. So, we're not really here to talk about the Royals necessarily. I want to talk about you as a broadcaster, and basically just take us back to at a certain point in your life, you knew you wanted to be a broadcaster. When was that?
I don't know the exact year or age, but it was sometime, I would guess, in the 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old range, maybe. But I sometimes wonder if it was before that, just in the sense that I actually remember, I vividly can remember coming into school in probably second grade. It was first or second grade, because I know I had the same teacher for those 2 years. She moved up with us. And just bugging her about what had happened the night before in sports. Did you see this? Did you see that? This is what happened. That's what happened. So I don't know if I knew at that point that this is something that I wanted to do, but at that I enjoyed letting people know what was going on. And I don't think it was too much after that, maybe 9, 10 years old, where I would definitely have the volume down on the TV and I'd be announcing the games that I was seeing, baseball games, basketball, football, hockey, and all of that. And I think I probably knew somewhere early in my teen years that this is something that I wanted to do.
So has it always been sports?
Yeah, I think so. And my start in the business was in news, and that was really just a matter of getting my foot in the door and seeing where it would take me and ultimately wanting to do sports. And I wouldn't say that I really loved news, although it did help me cut my teeth and get the repetition and get a chance to do a lot of different things. But yeah, it was always sports, and it wasn't necessarily a specific sport. It kind of worked out that I ended up in baseball most of the time, which happened to be one of my favorite sports. But I've done just about every sport.
Yeah, I have, just kind of from your history and your bio, you're at Fox Sports Kansas City now. You were in St. Louis for several years doing the Cardinals.
Yeah, sorry.
And the Rams and the Blues as well.
Someone was still paying me to talk about sports, though. That's a pretty good gig.
That's true, and you were also a reporter and an anchor in St. Louis, and before that you were in Wisconsin. So, but now you get to play a part that we all dream of. Okay, you get to be the guy who is there with the team. You get to be the guy who you don't have to go out and swing a bat. You don't have to.
Which is a good thing, by the way.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
well, that's some of us would like to go out and swing a bat, but most of us would probably look like Kevin Herrera doing it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing it. It just wouldn't look very good.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk about it.
Could you do better than Herrera?
No.
Really?
Yeah. He's still an athlete.
That's sad.
But I could talk about it better than him.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So, what is your contact like with the team on game day?
Really, on any day, what's interesting, and I really figured out once I came here, and I'd been in the business about 12 years or so by the time I got here, and I don't feel like I really truly figured out the way to go about this profession until I arrived in Kansas City, and I think the reason for that is this is the first job where I've ever been around a team every single day. Even when I was traveling with the St. Louis Cardinals, I'd split that time with other guys, and so I might go on a trip and then come home and have 5 or 6 days off and miss a bunch of games, and you'd work year-round doing other sports, hockey and all that. I'm the only guy here. I've done, I have to add it up, but we did 140 games a year for my first 6 years, and it's 150 for the last 2. So, do the math on that. I've missed 1 game for a funeral in 8 years. So that's well over 1,000 games of always being the guy doing the show. And what I learned, and this is really true, I mean, for anybody that is watching, an aspiring broadcaster, is that everything is about relationships. And everything is about contacts and trust. And that's true in life. Sometimes we forget that a camera's rolling and you just have to get the soundbite. And that's what we all learn going through school. That's what we all think we need. And we do. I mean, at the end of the day, they say, okay, I need a soundbite from Ned Yost on this, and I need a soundbite from Mike Moustakas on this. And you have to get those because you need to hear from the players. But what I learned was building that trust, building that comfort level. The reason why I hope when you see guys being interviewed by me live after the game, look, we all live in a cliche world, but the reason I think and hope why they're so comfortable is that I have built that trust, and that's being around them every single day. And what you don't see on camera is just me walking by guys in the clubhouse. How's it going? How's the family? What's going on with this? Can you believe this happened? Did you see that this guy did that? And it might be 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute around a guy. And it's not every single day, and that builds up trust. And for some guys, like Alex Gordon, I've been around him for 8 years, he would do anything for me. But it's also understanding that there are days where he's busy, and there are days where he's got things going on, reading body language and all of that. So that's the everyday, and especially for baseball. A lot different from football. Football, it's all out. You need everything you can get. Baseball's a long season, and sometimes I might say, you know what, I need this from Alcides Escobar today, but you know what? I just talked to him the last 2 days. Unless I really need it, let's back off, and we'll get him on a different day. So that's sort of the everyday grind, if you want to call it that.
Right. Now, one of the questions that I'm always curious about is, I know that during the flow of a game, the players are pretty well sequestered to their dugout, and we have the impression that you guys have complete contact and complete access to the players, but that's probably not exactly the case. What is your access and your relationship to the players in actual game time?
I mean, it is pretty limited. The fact of the matter is that's that 3-hour stretch or whatever it might be where they're supposed to be focusing on the game. They don't need to be answering questions. They don't want to be answering questions. And so a lot of that relationship to me is, if I'm down by the dugout and I'm moving around a bit, and I've got a booth that we sit into, which enables me to sit down with Jeff Montgomery and be able to do some research and observe. And then when I'm down by the dugout, which I'll do from time to time, some of it is just observing what's going on in the dugout and letting the producer know, hey, so-and-so's grabbing a bat. I think he might be coming in to pinch hit for someone. And they've got cameras on everything too, but they're looking at everything. Or, hey, such and such happened. I will really not engage the players when the game is going on unless they engage me. And sometimes it's just fun stuff, and this gets back to the relationships. And some of it, quite honestly, I'm not going to report on. And some of it might be interesting, and I will report on it. It might just be, hey, come down to me when you get a chance, because let me talk about the reaction after that home run. Let me talk about what's going on right now. But some of it might be as simple and fun as Gerard Dyson turning to me in Tampa, and I'm in the camera well, and turning to me and saying, Joel, I'm betting the guys right now that I can be quiet the whole game. I said, that's not going to last more than 3 innings. And I had to leave it, and I come back. I said, how'd it go? He goes, yeah, I made it 1 inning. Fun stuff like that. And some of it is, again, stuff you could report on. Some of it is just filed away for telling a story maybe here today.
Yeah.
And so to me, a lot of the contact during the game is less about that back and forth and more just about some observations. And there are some guys, Rusty Kuntz, the first base coach, he's standing over by me a lot of the times, and I can learn some things from him, and he is very engaging. And other guys are just messing around and having fun. So there's a little bit of give and take there, I guess, but for the most part, most of what I'm doing is before and after.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Jeff Montgomery, and there's Hall of Fame pitcher, and a lot of times the athletes that transition into broadcast, there's a lot of them that are really, really good. Monty is one of the really good ones, and quite often the really good ones are often paired with really good broadcasters because they develop a good rapport with them. So how have you been able to develop such a good rapport with Jeff Montgomery?
Well, I love talking about this one because it has been a process and an evolution, and one that began very well. I mean, we have, I don't think he and I have had a bad day, and we've worked together for 6 years. Now, if you remember, when Paul Splittorff was sick, Monty was coming in just to kind of help out. You know, Split was struggling with his voice, and it helped to have an extra guy in there, and they still wanted Split to be a part of it because he was so good and so legendary. And so that was really my first exposure to him, other than having met him a few times. I mean, now he's one of my close friends, and you know, we'll carpool to the airport, and we don't live all that far from each other, and you know, family weddings and this and that, and you know, even a vacation here and there. And I get back to relationships and trust. And look, you can do this job and not like the guy next to you. You really can. And if you're really good at it, you can do it and fake it too. Because I know people that work in this business. And if you're professional enough and you don't see eye to eye, you have to figure out a way to make it work.
Hud and Ryan?
Hud and Ryan get along fine.
Okay.
But I mean, there are other broadcasters on other teams that I know don't really see eye to eye. And I don't know a lot more than that because it's not my problem. And I try to stay out of other people's problems. But if they're good at what they do, they'll make it work. And no one at home should know that. The flip side of that is I think fans sometimes may know subconsciously. And I would hope and think that fans watching Monty and I see the chemistry we have. I know I feel it, I know he feels it. But to get back to him, you know, it's easy to say that anybody that played this game can just go out there and do it. It's so much easier said than done. What all of those players, former players, have is the knowledge of the game. Now the question is, how willing are they to work? And some of them don't have to. I mean, some of them are just really good. But in Monty's case, he wants to work as hard as anyone, which is very much, from what I understand, the way he was as a pitcher. And he just gets better and better every day. I think that there weren't necessarily nerves, but in his early couple of years, it was maybe not as much comfort. And I felt like my job was to make things easier for him. My job, I look at my job as being a point guard. That's always the analogy I give. And a point guard that can score sometimes, but a point guard that needs to spread the ball around and pass it. And I felt like in the early years with him, I was doing a lot of the scoring because he was still getting comfortable. He was getting used to it. And if he was, again, to use the analogy, dropping the ball, I would pick it up and we'd make it work. I don't have to do that anymore. And talk about chemistry, he and I could show up. If he were to walk in here right now and they were to say, do a show, and we hadn't talked about it, we could do it. It's not advisable. It's not something we like to do because we both enjoy the preparation, but we have done so many of these together that we can read each other. And a lot of what you see from us, most of what you see from us, is planned but off the cuff at the same time. And he has gotten so good that I don't worry about a thing, and I almost have a mental checklist. Okay, where do you want to go with here? Where do you want to go with here? Where do you go with here? Okay, let's go. Boom. Yep. And we go.
Yeah, and as a fan, that chemistry does come through. That chemistry does come through clearly.
I like to push his buttons a little bit. I mean, he's pretty straight-laced, and I don't mean that as his being a dud at all. He's got the best stories. He's a phenomenal storyteller. He has a mean streak, all that kind of stuff that you saw on the mound. You know, a great sense of humor. But you have to push him to get him there. And so and his reply sometimes will be quick and witty and short. And my goal often is not to make him uncomfortable, but just to push his buttons a little bit, because if for no other reason, I enjoy it, but I think the fans probably do too.
Yep. So the social media has really changed a lot of things in the last several years. And one of the things that we're seeing is that the interactive element of broadcasting is changing. I mean, you have the different hashtags and whatnot. So people can just tweet in questions or tweet in things to go up on the boards at Kauffman. Are you seeing any type of evolution in broadcasting from that being your role as kind of the everyman broadcaster? Are you seeing an evolution in that everyman broadcaster with the social media element where fan participation is playing a role?
Yeah, and I think it's it's kind of changing every day, it seems like. And I think that there's still a lot of, I mean, I think the one thing that everybody knows is that it's important at this point. It's something that you can't ignore. I remember when I got on Twitter, and I want to say maybe this was, let's say 2010 or something like that. And I remember somebody that I worked with who was behind the scenes saying, you know what, no one's paying attention to that. People aren't going to be looking at Twitter and social media while they're watching a game. Now, he was very wrong. He was an old school guy. And that was very much the old school approach. And I think that, you know, if you're in your 50s or 60s, I mean, it's amazing to me now that my parents, who are late 60s, early 70s, and they live in Chicago and have for 30-something years, 35 years, they got hooked on the Royals last year, in part because of what they did. And I think they'd always wanted to watch my stuff. And when they started watching the games on the internet late last year, they got, you know, like the end of the year cheap package, and they got sucked into the team and ended up buying the whole package for this year. One, oh, we could watch our son every night. Two, we can't get enough of this team. But they're not going to be sitting there on Twitter or social media while they're watching it. It's enough for them to be watching the game just, you know, via the internet, via the MLB app. But the younger generation now is watching the game. They're maybe tweeting about it, or Vines, or whatever all the other stuff is, right? Facebook's probably way out of date for the younger generation at this point, so I'm still old enough that I'm on there. But, you know, that's to me where it's changed. People want instant feedback. They want instant interaction. And by the way, the people that I hear from on Twitter change night by night. If the Royals win, I hear from one group. If the Royals lose, I hear from the other group. So during the recent struggles, this team with the best record in the American League, I've heard from a lot of people. Now, when they won last night, I didn't hear from any of those people. So that's interesting to me too. But there's no question. And so I think TV and TV execs, I think, I'm not in on these meetings, but what I feel like you see is that they're constantly trying new things and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work and what's getting the most response. And I think that that's going to continue to evolve over time as they figure out this new world of TV. What I do know is that every one of our clips from pregame and postgame shows with interviews and reaction, they're up on the internet being tweeted out by Fox Sports like this. And I feel like they just figured that out this year, with all due respect to writers out there who do a great job. But people want to see video. People want to hear reaction. And they can get it real easily just by looking on their phone.
Yep. So I literally could sit here all day and discuss Royals baseball with you.
I would be late to work then.
Well, that's okay. We'll just bring them here. But my last question for you, and it's just to bring it back, being, you know, we're a community college and we're training up aspiring journalists and broadcasters. What would your perspective, from your perspective in the industry, from the inside of the industry and from your growth up to that point, what advice would you give to aspiring broadcasters and journalists?
This is my favorite question to ask, and it'll be my favorite answer question in our conversation, because, you know, when I look out and I see those that are behind the cameras here, and I know there are people in the control room who I haven't seen yet, but they're watching me and hearing me, and I've been in all of their shoes. I've done all of this stuff. And so this is important to me. And this business, I mean, if I have my dream job right now, and I believe I do, and I love it, it took a long time to get here. And I think what happens in this business, I don't care what school you go to, and I don't care whether you're starting to study this in high school, whether you're in the biggest university in the country, community college, you're in the most amazing journalism school, you're in a small place that nobody knows who you are. Everybody's coming out wanting to do this. If you are taking this kind of class or doing this, you probably have an interest in getting in front of the camera, in operating the camera, in audio, in editing, in you know, directing, whatever it might be. And I'll just take you back real quick. I mean, when I got out of college, and it was the same thing. Now, at that point, internet was just kind of starting, or email was just kind of starting, and you know, you had to send out some letters and all of that. And I realized I applied for a job. I'm a Chicago kid at a small TV station in Montana. Oh, I'll get this, as a news reporter. And I got rejected. And it dawned on me at that point that if I'm getting rejected in the middle of nowhere, Montana, I could get rejected everywhere. And so I just started driving around the country and knocking on doors. And I'd call in advance to news directors and say, hey, I'm going to be in your town next week, which of course was only for that. Can I come say hi? And suddenly I started meeting people and making connections. And I was no better than anybody else coming out of school. But suddenly, 4 months later, I get in a small town of 7,000 people in Wisconsin, I get a job offer. And suddenly after that, within the next couple of months, other stations started calling, and I'd already had this job. So that's where the relationship started. And so many people, and this is the advice, the very long story here, but my advice is if you think that you're going to get in somewhere big right away, your odds are so slim, and it can be very easy to get frustrated. But if you're willing to go in and make very little money and get your feet wet somewhere small, and my first job, I was reporting, I was anchoring, I was a cameraman, I was editing, I was producing a lot of my own stuff, and that all really led to me being very well-rounded. And then suddenly started climbing up the ladder, and suddenly those connections of an internship in college got me back to Madison, where I'd gone to school, and I'm working there, and then suddenly somebody that I'd worked with in the previous job was in St. Louis, and I get a job there. It's a long path, but what you will see is that most people, will drop out. I say, you know what, this isn't worth it, and they give up their dream. And it's the handful of people that aren't taking shortcuts and are willing to get in at the bottom level, suddenly pursuing it, end up here. Almost everybody that I went to school with is out of the business at this point, that I took these kind of classes with. One guy ended up being one of the writers for the movie Wreck-It Ralph, and was involved in writing, I think, the movie Cedar Rapids, or the creator of it. I haven't seen him in years, but he was one of the guys that I visited. He was like a morning news reporter in Rochester, Minnesota, and now he's in Hollywood. So he did better than me. But very few. I mean, everybody else kind of went on to PR jobs and this job and that job, and good for them. But, you know, with all the hard work, I kind of ended up doing what I always wanted to do.
Well, Joel, I can't thank you enough for
Pleasure.
taking your time out of this, what I know is a extremely busy and historical time for the Royals. So thank you so much.
Shawn, I appreciate it. It's good to be here. Yeah, we need a bigger one now.
Well,
we need a bigger one.
Hopefully we'll get one this year. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Well, the celebration is just getting underway, and joined right now by one of the big heroes of the night, Mike Moustakas, getting it done. First division title for this team since 1985. What does this mean to you, and of course to Kansas City?
It means a ton. I mean, this team battled all throughout the entire year. You know, we never gave up, never stopped, kept playing hard, and you know, you can't say enough about every guy on this team. I mean, came out every single day ready to play.
So on behalf of the whole JCAV team, and thanking Joel Goldberg for being here, I'm Shawn Simpson, and this has been your Cavalier Sports Report.